Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? A little bit late, about 54 minutes late. Sorry about that. I apologize. Um, Welcome to another edition of the Fight Up TV live chat. I just finished season 2 of Narcos, which is why I was playing the theme song. If you haven't seen Narcos, it's a great series on Netflix. I just finished season 2, Narcos Mexico. Awesome. It's awesome ending. Excited for season 3 if they do make a season 3. So you guys have watched it, you know what I'm alluding to, but it's going to get really, really good. But once again, like we've done for the past month, every Monday we go and take a look at the boxing topics and have a little chat. As always, you guys control the theme of the live chat. You guys pick the questions, we answer them, we go where you guys want to go. Season 3 Narcos USA. Now I think it's gonna keep on going with building up to Chapo. That's what I think is gonna happen, because just the story that he has, the 2 prison breaks and all that, that could be a movie all in itself. So I think that lends itself to like 3 seasons worth of stuff if they go that way. And then the other guys too have very interesting stories as well. Cowboys Nation, what up, man? What's up, dude? How's everything in Dallas? I know a few people that are from Dallas, man. How's life over there? Let me know. The CIA did it. What did the CIA do? I know they were involved with the arming the Contras in the 80s and all that. So CIA sells drugs. I've heard that before. I've heard that. We wouldn't be able to know if it was true. North Korea sells drugs. I've heard other countries sell drugs too for income. So ask Rick Ross. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, especially during that era in the 80s, the mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s, when all that was ramping up. I know we were arming the Contras, and who was it? Like Barry Seals was like running coke for the CIA or whatever. I think that's what it was. Did Carol really murder her husband, fed her to the Tigers? Man, so I finished Narcos, okay? And the next series that I'm on is I'm going to finish up Stranger Things. I just started it, the season 3. And then after Stranger Things, I'm going to see Tiger King. I've seen everybody talk about Tiger King, about this crazy white lady called Carol Baskin. Supposedly she fed her husband to the Tigers. The husband was like a billionaire or something like that. The other guy was, I guess he lured young males because of his Tigers. I haven't seen it, so this is what I'm getting from the memes and the photos and all that. Justin, what up, bro? Shout out. Thanks for joining us. Hey, guys, make sure to tell everybody that there's a fan of boxing. We do these live streams every Monday. We usually do them at 8, a little bit late today. I finished with my workout a little bit later, so I apologize. We're usually at 8, but I'm just trying to still figure out the right time where we can get the most amount of people on here to have a cool commune conversation with each other about what's going on in boxing and in current events. This chat doesn't always have to be about boxing or MMA. It can be about life. It can be about anything that you guys want to talk about. Like I mentioned, you guys control where this conversation goes. Yo, Hubs Tribal, what up, bro? What's going on, man? Make sure to follow us on Instagram at FightUpTV. If you guys want to give me a follow as well, at Hey It's Marcos V on Instagram. Saw a few boxing questions up here already. Let's see here. Crawford versus Charlo asks Johnny Cash 17. Who you got? No fence sitting. Excuse me. I might be getting that Rona. Oh, I hope not. Yeah, would not be good for business, guys. Okay, Crawford versus Charlo. Jermell Charlo, obviously, the 154 Charlo. You know what? I would love to see that fight. I think it's a good fight. I think the biggest factor in a fight like that would be size, because obviously, Crawford's a smaller guy who's moving up the weight classes, so he's not as big as Charlo. From interviewing Charlo in person over the years, guy is a big, big dude. I'm surprised how he makes 154, how Jarrett Hurd makes 154, because when I see him, he has the frame of somebody who should be a middleweight or a super middleweight. Big, big frame, man. Big back, big wingspan. So that would be a big advantage for him if a Terence Crawford fight were to present itself for Jermell Charlo. And you got to think, would Terence Crawford be able to keep Charlo off of him? Would Charlo just walk through these punches because he's so much bigger, and he wouldn't give that respect that fighters usually give or demand in the early rounds to the other fighters, to let them know, hey, I got pop. You better be careful about what you do in there, or at least think twice about committing to a punch, because I'm going to get you right back. And these punches, they got some bad intention towards them. So it'd be interesting to see. Crawford, obviously, tremendous counterpuncher, would complicate things with his timing, the ability to switch orthodox and southpaw. The size, though, would be a big potential problem on paper for Jermell Charlo. Who would be the favorite in the fight? I would think that Terence Crawford would be the betting favorite in the fight, but I could see a lot of people rolling with Charlo because of the size, because they probably think Charlo's just going to walk through him because of that. But I think the more skilled fighter technically that's shown he has more tools in his tool bag is Terence Crawford. So he would be in the favorite in that fight. Man, what's going on with me here, guys? Hope this isn't I haven't been around anybody, so it's probably Diet Coke right here. CIA sells drugs, says Troll Life. Okay, Silos Green. Why do you think a lot of boxers let go after a fight? Nutrition-wise and training-wise, I see that as a big disadvantage. Athletes in other sports usually stay in shape throughout the year. Silos, man. Okay, so this is a very good question, and this is a question that I can speak on from experience as being an athlete in a different sport where I had to cut weight, and I had to cut a lot of weight. I used to wrestle since I was like 11 years old up until my 20s, and I remember for a good 4 years, I would cut from 155 all the way down to 125 and then to 130 my senior year in high school. So I cut a lot of weight. So I'll tell you why a lot of boxers let go after the fight, because they're so fed up with dieting and just eating salad and eating lettuce and cucumbers and tomatoes all the time, and eating literally portions of food that are the size of your palm. Imagine having to do that for a month and a half. It'll drive you nuts. You don't want to eat that food anymore. You want to enjoy normal life. You want to be a normal person. You don't want to look across the table at your friends eating delicious ass food, and then you look at your plate and it's lettuce, because a lot of the time, 2 days before the fight, you're not like on point with like a solid nutritionist. And I've seen this in wrestling. You're just eating salad, dude. You're eating lettuce, tomatoes. The day before a weigh-in, my routine, and I knew I'd always burn 2-3 pounds when I would sleep, is I would stop with water intake and food intake at 6 o'clock, and I'd go run for an hour, and then I'd go to sleep in my sweats wrapped in a bunch of blankets. I'd wake up and I'd be 2-3 pounds. I'd be able to burn 2-3 pounds in my sleep. So, you deprave yourself of all this good food for such a long time that finally when a fight is done, you don't have to diet anymore. You let loose because you've been not being able to eat all this good food that everybody gets to eat. At the end of the day, athletes, boxers, they're human too. They want to enjoy the same food that we enjoy. So, they're going to binge. And, it happens because it kind of, it's a weird way. It's not like the thing I could equate it to is that, you deprive of yourself of something for so long that when you're finally able to get it, you go and you binge. Say you don't drink for like 2 months, and then you finally decide you want to go drink. You go to the bar and get plastered for the weekend, just pop, 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 shots to the dome. Same thing when they tell a fighter in camp, no sex with your lady, or no sex with your ladies and your side chicks or whatever. All that testosterone builds up. So by when you're done with the fight, you're so fed up that you gotta bust a nut. So that's why I think a lot of the times a lot of fighters do that. Now, obviously, it gets to a certain point where discipline comes into it. Obviously, you got to realize you're a professional athlete. You make multi-million-dollar paydays. There has to be a limit as to for how long you go into a bad diet. After my wrestling tournaments, I would binge for a weekend and then I'd get back. But in that weekend, I'd gain like 10 pounds. And I would binge like crazy, man. I'd be eating pizzas, drinking sodas, just eating every single junk food possible because it had been such a long time that I hadn't eaten junk food. But when you're at that level, I think it's important, to realize the position that you're in, because it becomes a lot harder once you put on so much weight to burn it off. That these camps are fat burning camps. You're not working on technique. You're not working on improving the flaws that you've done in other fights. What you're really working on is cardio and to lose that excess weight that you gain. And it just makes it a super excruciating camp, and especially an excruciating last 2-3 days, because that cut is brutal. And I'm telling you, man, I've lived it in wrestling where I've had to be in the sauna for like an hour with sweats on it and still not make weight, because I would slack or I wouldn't do cardio prior to a tournament. You're super irritable. You're in a bad mood all the time. You can't focus. It's just you're just in a really crabby mood the whole time. And I think a lot of times when we're doing interviews with fighters, the 2 days before the fight, I could tell that the weight cut's affecting them, or they're getting in that, because I lived through it. And it's usually, final press conference is the day before the weigh-in. That's the last stretch of the weight cut. That's when you're the most irritable, the most just in a bad mood. So it's funny because I could tell, but I could relate also because I was in that position for such a long time when I wrestled. So I think that's why they let go after the fight. Silos. Hubs Tribal, what up? Damani Williams, come on, bro. This is a wise boxing chat. You guys are funny, dude. Some of these questions. What do you think of Spence's tune-up opponent? Asked Chuck P. Seville's Boxing. Spence is saying he doesn't want a tune-up opponent. Props to him. If I was his management, his promoter, you're in this dilemma. You got to look at it on both sides. One side is you give him a tune-up opponent to see how he is, to see if the accident affected him at all. But you run a risk that if it did affect him, he might end up getting tested and looking really, really bad. And say he doesn't respond the same to punches like he did before, you run the risk of losing a lot of future paydays or losing a big, big fight because something bad could happen in that tune-up. That's the one side. This was a situation that was not brought up to me, but so when Chuck Liddell was training to fight Tito Ortiz, his trainer, Antonio McKee, for that camp, known Antonio McKee for years. And I asked him, Tone, because he revealed to me that Chuck did no sparring in that camp to prepare for Tito Ortiz. And I asked him, Tone, like, How are you going to have a camp and he doesn't spar? You got to see how he's going to react to a punch. And he's like, look, Marcos, it's a multi-million-dollar fight. Say I throw him out and spar, okay? And he gets clipped. And it messes him up. He can't go through with the fight, or it puts him in such a bad place that it ruins him before the fight. I'd rather not risk that. I'd rather we find that out the night of the fight. We saw what happened the night of the fight. He got jabbed by Tito Ortiz and he got knocked out. But I saw his thinking with that. Now, if you put that in comparisons to Spence's situation, it's a risk. You put him in there with a tune-up opponent, but a tough tune-up opponent, and you got a lot of variables there. You don't know how he's going to react to the punches. Do you risk that, or you put him in with a big-name opponent and kind of roll the dice and see where it goes? He's not supposed to look sharp because he's coming off of that. You put him in there with an opponent, he has a close fight, that's going to be the thing. Well, he hasn't fought since Porter. He had the accident, da-da-da-da-da. So do I personally think if I was managing him that I would put him in a tune-up fight? Depends how he looks in the gym. I would have a pre-camp. At the end of that pre-camp, I'd have a really, really hard sparring session, and I'd want to see how we would do in that sparring session. Based on that, would make me make my decision, and then I go give him a rest, and then go into a camp with said opponent, whether it be a tune-up guy, or a big-name opponent based on that pre-camp. So I think he has been training and been having some sort of pre-camp as well. So that's how my take would be on it. Andrade versus Charlo needs to happen, says 50 TG. I agree, man. That's a great fight. I'd want to see it. I remember when I believe Charlo knocked out Julian Williams at USC and Andrade crashed the press conference. I wasn't there. I was in Florida, but we had our guys there and called him out during the press conference, called both of them out. Fight still hasn't happened yet. I hope it happens, obviously with the bigger Charlo, with jermell Charlo. It's a good fight style-wise. And if both people are looking for opponents, it's a natural fight to make. Eddie Hearn has said on interviews that he would allow Andrade to go to Fox to fight. So it'd be a great fight. But there's a lot of great fights for jermell at 160 in the PBC stable. And one fight, it's funny. I brought this fight up to Eddie, and he told me it was a shit fight. I disagree. I think it'd be a badass fight. But when I told him, well, Charlo has Eubank, that's a good fight. And he's like, that's a shit fight. And I'm like, no, it's not. That would be an action-packed fight. Chris brings it. He's exciting. He's action-packed. He's a fan-friendly fighter. And so is jermell. They would clash right away. The build-up to the fight would be great. Both guys talk ish. You got Chris's dad that would bring color to it. You got jermell that would bring color to it. The build-up would be great. That is a great fight. Eddie Hearn disagrees with me on that. But, obviously he wants his guy to fight jermell. Completely agree with him. If I was managing him, I would be pushing for that. But for style-wise, Charlo versus Eubank, badass fight. That's a great fight. That has the potential to have some very exciting moments if that fight does happen. What would never happen? Let's see. Charlo versus Eubank would be excellent, says Damani. Charlo and Eubank have a common opponent in Korobov, says Yeet Yeet. John Cena, 16-time world champion. We can't see him, though. I can't see him anywhere. That's the thing. I can never see Mr. John Cena. Matt C. Hey, man, love the channel. Can you give my man Jack Conlon a shout-out? Is it Conlon or Conlon? I think it's Conlon. Yo, Jack Conlon, what up, man? Hope you're doing well. I hope this finds you in good health. And I hope you're taking care of yourself. Damani thought Porter beat Spence. It was a close fight, man. I was there live. I scored the fight for Fox. I was. I'm not gonna lie. I was extremely stressed to score that fight. I was stressing out when that fight was announced because I knew there was a good chance that I'd be scoring the fight for the pay-per-view telecast. When the assignment was given to me, I was stressing out because Sean Porter fights are very, very close. And the last Sean Porter fight that I scored, it was close. I was stressing out about that fight because obviously I don't want to screw it up. I'm stressing out because there's a lot of rounds there that are close rounds, that are swing rounds, and it's really it comes down to what you like as a judge, what you like to see. What are you counting? Are you counting jabs as effective? What are you counting as punches that are landing clean and effective? And when I mean effective, I mean doing damage. I scored the fight for Ugas when Porter fought Ugas, when I scored that fight for Fox. See, a majority of people agreed with me after the fight when I got tweets, but a lot of people felt that Sean won the fight. When Sean fought Thurman, I scored that fight a draw. Sean is in a lot of close fights. It's tough because Sean throws so much and he's so active. And when you're throwing so many punches, you got to count the work that person's doing. So you got to think, okay, wait a second. This guy landed his opponent. I'm talking like, say it was someone who's throwing a lot of punches in contrast to somebody who's not landing as much, but landing clean punches. As a judge, you're there asking yourself, okay, who landed the more damaging punches? Who did more to win the round? And that's where it's tricky when it comes to Sean, because Sean's always going to do more to win the round. Now, is he being clean with the punches? Because sometimes he smothers the punches. Sometimes you can't see the punches that are landing clearly in this area here. I think in the Spence, because I thought about this, in the Spence fight, I thought, why didn't I give some of these rounds to Sean? And I thought, okay, when they were on the inside, Spence was landing the prettier shots, the cleaner shots, where I could clearly see he's landing cleanly and clearly and damaging in the scoring zone. Pop! Sean would throw on the inside. Some would be blocked, some would be smothered. It was hard to tell. But I could clearly see when Spence would land, which is why I gave him the nod with some rounds. I remember coming into like the 8th or 9th round, I had like a dead even fight. And yeah, I was extremely stressed out. At the end, the knockdown proved to be critical in that fight. At that point, I had already Spence, I think, maybe up ahead like a round or two. I thought he pulled away in the last frame of the fight. I think like from round 10, 11, 12, I saw him kind of pulling away, and then with the knockdown, it gave him the edge. But yeah, man, Sean is his fights are tough to score, and he's had a lot of close fights. You can make an argument he's undefeated outside. Well, I take that back. Kell Brook clearly beat him, but outside of that, you can make an argument that a lot of these fights that he had with Spence, Ugas, Porter, Thurman could have gone his way. Ronald Hernandez asks, with that criteria, who did you have winning, Lara or Canelo? I was there ringside for Lara versus Canelo. So let me tell you this with that fight. That fight was Erislandy's Lara's fight to win. He let that fight go. If he would have just been a little bit more active, thrown a little bit more, he would have won the fight. I scored it for Canelo. I thought Canelo won that fight, but barely, by the slightest of margins. But I had him winning that fight because Lara would land like 5 punches, and Canelo was doing great body work, was more active, was coming forward, and I felt he was doing more in the fight to win the rounds. That was Lara's fight to lose, but it was also a very, very difficult fight to score. One fight that is controversial because half the people think Canelo won and half the people think that Lara won. That's the thing when you pit a defensive fighter against an offensive fighter. And it's always, I get so stressed out when I see those matchups because I know 9 times out of 10, no one's going to be happy. It's going to be a split fan base. It's going to be a decision that's disputed because half the people like the guy who's coming forward, who's throwing punches, who's the aggressor, trying to press the action. Half the other people like the guy that's being the matador, that's hitting and moving out. So it makes it difficult. Yeah, okay, Ronald, you mentioned the headshots, but you also got to see the body work. That's the thing. People don't take it into account that a body shot, a power shot to the body, you got to count that, man. That's an effective shot. That counts for a lot, the body work. And I think a lot of people don't take the body work into account. They become, obviously it's prettier to look at when you land a headshot, when your head goes back. Obviously, yeah, that's going to grab the fans' attention. It's going to grab the judges' attention. But you got to really be hyper-focused with this stuff and look at the work, too, that's being done on the inside. When you look at these fights, especially when you're as close as we are when we're scoring the fights, you're seeing a lot of work that sometimes you miss on TV. A lot of shots being landed on the inside, a lot of sneaky little uppercuts that are landing. They're landing clean and flush. But because the changes of the camera angles or where the fighters are positioned, you're not able to see that. But we're able to see that. So sometimes when these scores are a little wider than what people at home are watching, I could see why, because we see a little bit more up close than what the fan at home is seeing. And also, here's the other thing. We're hearing how these punches are landing, being up there ringside. We know when something might not look like it landed hard on TV, but being there up close, you hear these punches. I'm telling you, man, it's a whole different thing when you're watching a fight there 10 feet away from what's going on. So that's my perspective on that. But the system, and I've said this time and time again with the scoring. I think the system, how it's built, is flawed because you have 3 judges from 3 different vantage points, okay? Sometimes their vantage points are obstructed. The ref gets in the way. They're looking at the back of the fighter and they can't see the fighter that's in front of them that's landing punches. So it's flawed. It's flawed. I honestly think the judges should be looking at a monitor. They're ringside with head blocking earphones because the monitor gives you the best view of everything. And I think you'd get a lot more better decisions if they went ahead and did that instead of how they have them positioned right now, because they're missing a lot of punches based on where they're at. And, because of that, I could see as to why some scorecards are just completely out there. The other thing is, just like with artists, just like with athletes, just like with actors, there comes a time when it's time to stop. Comes a time when your work quality suffers. And I think for a lot of these judges, because a lot of them are older, they're just too old to score fights, that they just can't see the fights and can't judge them the way they used to. And there's no review process that I know of to reprimand somebody. It takes an egregious scorecard, but then these judges get put back in. There's no, I feel like there's no true accountability for that, because okay, they get put on timeout for like a few months and then they get put back in there instead of getting bumped down. So yeah, Fernando Torres, big time hater. Just like to point that out. No negative people in here. Timeout. Yeet. Steve Farhood once said something along the lines of, you have to score big fights with your eyes and not your ears. The fans react to everything in a big fight. Very true. Here's the point with that. I watched Cotto Mayweather last night. Cotto was missing punches, and because Floyd's movement was so subtle, the fans that were seated far, to them, it looked like Cotto was landing when he really wasn't. So, obviously, you're seeing Cotto throw all these punches, and you think he's landing them because by the way that the fans are cheering, he's really not. So it's true. You got to score the fight with your eyes. Take your emotion out of it also as well, because I feel that has a big thing with fans also, that they want to see, and they have kind of like a confirmation bias when it comes to that. They give the fighter they want to win too much credit for stuff when it comes to that. If something glances, they'll give that glancing punch more credit than what the opponent is actually doing. So you got to score with your eyes and take your emotion out of it when you're scoring these fights. Miguel Delgado. What up, Miguel? What's going on, man? What's up with fight nights? What are you hearing, Marcos? Okay, so I haven't spoken to the guy from EA in about 4 years. And I don't even know if he's still the executive producer for that team that would be in charge of developing Fight Night. So I've mentioned this before in terms of Fight Night. So I went to E3 and I was at the EA booth and I asked just by chance, hey, is the team that's in charge of the UFC game, are they here? Because I'd like to talk to the executive producer. And the reception lady was like, yeah, actually they're here. Do you want to make an appointment? And I'm like, well, and I told him, I'm so-and-so. I work in the boxing industry. I just want to ask him just some quick questions regarding, if they'd make a fight night. She told me come back in an hour. So I came back in an hour and I found the gentleman and I spoke to him. So I'm like, yo, why hasn't EA made a fight night? And he told me the year that they started the UFC game is the year they stopped making the fight night. And he told me that they were concentrating all efforts on the UFC game, that the UFC game sold better than the EA fight night, and that it sold more units. And for upper management, that's all that matters. Make that example with a game that I grew up, that I loved, called Chrono Trigger. Love Chrono Trigger. The sequel, Chrono Cross, solid game, but not the story that I wanted. But there's a solid group of fans like me that want a sequel to Chrono Trigger. And the producers of that game have said, buy more units of Chrono Trigger and we'll make a sequel of Chrono Trigger. Same thing what the guy at EA told me. He said if more units were sold of that fight night, we would have kept making fight night. And at the end of the day, for us to make a fight night, we got to see that this thing could push a lot of units. The other thing that he told me was it's a lot easier to make a UFC game due to the licensing of the fighters. With the UFC, you have a company that controls everybody, that controls everybody's likeness. It's a lot easier to get everybody together. For a boxing game, it's a little bit harder. Everybody's independent. Everybody would have their own separate deals. I don't even know how they did it with the last game because it's just difficult. It's the business of boxing is a lot different than all the other leagues. With Madden, with FIFA, those organizations have the likenesses to those athletes, so it's a lot easier to make that stuff happen. With boxing, it's completely different. There's no central organization that's in charge of that, so it would be very difficult. But I think what I got out of the conversation was this. If a fight night, if we get any indication that a fight night would sell better than a UFC game, we'll start making fight nights again. Okay, let's see here. Fight Night was the best. Wild 100s. I agree, man. I love Fight Night. I wish they would make another one. But if they do make a Fight Night, it has to include everybody. It just can't be a stable of fighters. It just can't be DAZN Fight Night. No, that would be a disservice to us fans. If we want a game, a boxing game, it has to include everybody because boxing is bigger than DAZN. Boxing is bigger than any other promotional outfit. Boxing is a world sport. Include everybody in it, not just a single promoter's fighters. Javier, what up, bro? What's going on? Carlos Villegas, what's up, man? Carlos, I don't know, we might be related. What's going on, bro? Let's see your question here. Hey, Marcos, hope all is well. How do you see the fight between Teofimo and Loma going down when it finally takes place? I like Teofimo a lot. Hopefully he's ready for his big moment. Yeah, man. So Teofimo versus Lomachenko. You have a lot of people that are going to say that Teofimo is too much too quick, even though he's a world champion already, and he had an outstanding performance against Lomachenko. And you're going to have a lot of people that are going to favor Lomachenko just because of the experience, the Olympic pedigree, and just what he's done in the ring. I think there's ever a moment that, timing-wise, it could be the right moment for that fight. I think it'd be right now because it's looking like Lomachenko is a little bit more vulnerable than he was before. And I think that's because of the weight. He's at a weight now, at a higher weight. That's, Lomachenko's a featherweight, man. He's a blown up lightweight. These guys are a lot bigger than him. So they're able to take these punches a lot better than the smaller guys when he was just murking fools in the lighter weight classes, which is another reason why Lomachenko isn't knocking out guys as badly as he was before, because he's fighting bigger guys. When you fight a bigger guy, they can handle your punches. I actually think Lomachenko should move back down to 130, if I'm being honest. So with that being said, I think Lomachenko has Teofimo Lopez has a really, really good chance because he's a bigger fighter. He's explosive. But, obviously, Lomachenko is going to be the favorite in the fight. Lomachenko has shown that he's more versatile. The footwork, the fluidity is better. But we'll see. We'll see. Teofimo's on the rise. And kid's a beast, man. Kid's a beast. If I was Teofimo, if I was Lomachenko, I would do the fight now. The longer you wait for Teofimo, the better he's going to get. Just like how Floyd went ahead and fought against Canelo as early as he did, because they knew that the longer they waited for Canelo, the harder of a matchup it would be. So I think that on Loma's side, it's good to take the fight now. 92 AKU. Teo Lopez is the best right now. Miguel Delgado, off the subject, Marcos, but who was your favorite WWE wrestler or wrestlers back in the day? And were you a WCW or WWF guy? All right, guys. I was a huge pro wrestling fan growing up. Loved pro wrestling. I'm going to share a story that a lot of people don't know about me, that sometimes I get a little embarrassed to talk about, because when I look at it, it's like, man, you really wanted to do that? So when I was growing up, I wanted to be a pro wrestler. Wrestling was my life. I had wrestled folk style and freestyle from 11 years old. I went to college. I told myself, once I graduate college, I'm going to go to a pro wrestling school to learn this, because it's what I wanted to do. And I had my heart set on it. Grew up my hair, had it long, reached out to Lance Storm in Canada. I told him, hey, Lance, I want to join your wrestling school out there in Calgary. Lance wrote me a letter. Back then we had to write letters. Sent him a letter. He sent me a letter back. He told me, hey, Marcos, this is how it works. We have a house out here in Calgary. He sent me a map of the area. Told me, there's going to be you and other people in the house. This is how much it would be. This is how much the rent is. So the closer I got to the date, because I had paid a deposit to be in the house, the more I had this feeling inside that I just didn't want to do it anymore. It was the weirdest thing. I don't know, man. I was so dead set on that my whole entire life. And then like my last year in college, I was kind of second guessing it. And I felt like, you know what? I don't think it's not the same in here anymore. The same inside, like the passion's not there anymore. So I want to say like a month before I was going to graduate, because I was supposed to graduate in May. And then I believe in July or August, I was supposed to head out to Calgary to join Lance Storm School. I wrote Lance and said, hey, you know what, Lance? I've had a change of heart, man. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't think this is my calling anymore, which wasn't hard for me to come to the realization of, even though it's something I wanted to do since I was a little kid. Since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I was obsessed with pro wrestling. Lance reached out back to me and said, hey, it happens, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to keep your deposit. And I was like, no, give me my deposit back. And Lance was like, bro, you told me you were going to be here in the house. I saved the space up. Now I have an empty room that I can't sell anymore. So I'm keeping your deposit. And I was like, damn. All right. Lance, it's cool. So that's my little pro wrestling story. But I always looked up to Bret Hart. I thought Bret Hart was the best. Eddie Guerrero was one of my favorites. I was really into the Japanese wrestling. Great Muda, KJ Muto, I like to do, not to do, but I like to watch. Hayabusa. Obviously, Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle. Just, I liked all those guys. I was both. I watched WWF and WCW. 92 AKU, maybe you were afraid to fail like your dream. Nah, it wasn't that. It's just I lost the passion. I just didn't want to. Something was telling me inside that there's something else that you should be doing, that this isn't it. This isn't your route anymore. So, I just kind of listened to that little voice inside, and I chose a different path. And, it's funny because I actually tweeted Lance Storm 2 years ago, I think. And I'm like, because he had said something about an interview that I did, which I was like, what the hell? Like, how did Lance see this interview that I did? And I tweeted Lance. I'm like, yo, back when I was, because I graduated when I was 21. Like, yo, back when I was 21, I was supposed to go to your wrestling school. And I wrote you a letter and I actually was enrolled, but I had to change of heart and didn't do it. And he's like, what? Like, really? I'm like, yeah. I sent him a picture of the letter and he's like, oh shit. Okay. So it's funny. It's funny who ends up seeing your interviews when you're in this game. Did you watch Dark Side of the Ring about Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero? No, I have not. It's on the list of things that I want to see. I still get sad over Eddie Guerrero, man. I loved Eddie Guerrero. I was really a big fan of Eddie, man. And even now when I see old videos of him, it just brings a big smile to my face, man, because you never saw guys like Eddie. Like, obviously I'm Mexican-American, and in pro wrestling, you always saw like the Mexican-Americans and the Mexican wrestlers on WCW at the cruiserweights, and they were never given main event status. They're always the best, the most exciting. They're the most technically proficient, those smaller guys, but they were never given that big push back then in the 90s. And then Eddie came along and he got his big push. And then I remember when he had that match with Brock, and they wrote in the storyline that he was going to win the title. I like marked out like crazy because I would have believed they would have given the title to a guy that small, like Eddie, man. I loved Eddie. I loved watching him. Oh, man. I wish he was still here. That's all I'm going to say is I was a huge fan of Eddie Guerrero, and when he passed away, sucked. I was heartbroken, man. Danny Garcia versus Errol Spence. Who wins? Brian FRM860. What up, Brian? Thank you for going ahead and asking that question. Okay, Danny Garcia versus Errol Spence. It's a great fight, interesting fight. The key here is going to be activity. In my opinion, if I was game planning for the fight, we know Danny doesn't throw a lot. We know Danny's not the quickest. And Danny has to be planted to land his punches. So I think the key there would be for Errol to use his jab, much the way he did with Mikey. In the Mikey fight, the jab stopped Mikey from setting himself to throw punches, to throw his money punches, because Mikey will throw, set, throw again. He kind of not jumps in, but he steps in with the jab to throw the right. If you really look at tape, that's what he does. So, same thing with Danny. I think if Errol uses the jab to the body, to the top, and is really active with the jab, and just overall a lot more active than Danny, and make sure he doesn't fight Danny on the inside, where Danny can time him with punches and he moves around the ring, Errol would be favored in the fight with that game plan. I like the fight. I think the fight, they're going to fight. They're both in the PBC stable, so that fight is going to happen. So it's just a matter of when. But it's a great fight. Hanny Hatcham, Marcos. What's up? What's up, Hanny? What's going on, bro? Thank you for joining in the chat. Anybody see Richie? Richie from Brooklyn. No. Thumbs up for Richie, though. Aaron De Leon. Leo Santa Cruz versus Tank Davis. Who wins? Been asked this question before on the previous live chats. And I think with that fight, obviously Tank would be the favorite. He's the bigger guy, devastating puncher. It's really what kind of shape Tank comes in. And I think Tank would come in tremendous shape, because that would be a pay-per-view fight. This would be Tank's big moment. First pay-per-view fight, so I think that would really motivate him. So I think Tank would be in tremendous shape for that fight. When it comes down to it, I think Leo's big advantage in that fight is that Tank, even though he's a powerful puncher, he doesn't throw a lot. And I think if Leo's able to cut the ring off and just pressure and work his volume, he can end up winning a lot of close rounds. And if they have to work on defense, because Tank's a tremendous counterpuncher too as well. Tank will time you with punches. So Leo needs to be careful, but if he's able to pressure Tank, cut the ring off, and just be busy, and the key, if he's able to take Tank's punches, he has a very, very good chance, but it really does depend on the shape that Tank comes in. But I think Tank would come in tremendous shape for that fight. Jesse Ortiz didn't like Bobby the Brain Heenan. I loved Bobby the Brain Heenan. I thought it was hilarious. Super witty as well, man. Carlos, one more thing. I saw your jump rope skills in a video the other day, looking like, yeah, man, I'm trying to practice jump rope, dude. It's a great workout. Gets your heart rate up. Makes you sweat like crazy. Makes you tired. So, that's one thing that we could do right now, you guys, is if you have the luxury of living in an area that has a little bit of open space, or even if you have a backyard or a patio, go outside and jump rope, man. It's a great workout. Gets your blood going. Great cardio workout as well, especially when you start doing double unders. So that's a perfect workout you could do social distancing. I'm going to scroll up here to get to more of your questions, guys. Make sure to go ahead and follow us at FightHub TV on Instagram. Follow me as well at Hey, it's Marcos V on Instagram and on Twitter. Let's see here. I'm going to scroll a little bit up and see. Aaron De Leon. Oh, I don't want to cause any trouble, man. So I'm not going to. I like you, though, Aaron. I like you, bro. I like you. Let's see. Jesse Ortiz has an interesting question. Did you hear Virgil Ortiz wants to fight Ugas or Danny Garcia? That would be a big step up. Man, that'd be a huge step up because at this point, Virgil Ortiz hasn't fought anybody at that level. Not to say that Virgil Ortiz is not at that level. Guy's what, 14-0, 14 knockouts? Dude's a beast. And people need to take note of him. Up and coming guy. He's a contender already. He just hasn't fought anybody that is at that level. But I think it'd be a great test to see how far along he's come, how well he would do with somebody who's in the top 5, because certainly you can make the argument that Ugas won that Porter fight. I scored the fight for TV. I had him winning. No, Sean doesn't like that too much. It's a tough fight, man. Ugas is a hard style too, man. Ugas can make you look really, really bad when he wants to. I'd want to see the fight, and I want to see Virgil Ortiz tested. They're taking their time with him, obviously so. They're trying to build him up. He will get to a point where he's challenging for a world title and being in the conversation with those guys. But at this point, his progression's good. He's still very young. Keep building him up. Keep building his profile until there's a fan demand for fights like that. But it's going to come. In 2 years' time, he'll be there at that level fighting those guys. Ugas versus Crawford. DJ 2020 thinks Ugas washes Virgil Ortiz right now. Do you guys think? I'm going to ask you guys. I'm going to give you guys a moment to go and type in your guys' responses. What happens if Virgil Ortiz fights Yordenis Ugas? Who do you give the edge? Does Ortiz knock out Ugas? It's a tremendous power puncher. Or do you think Ugas outboxes him? I'm going to wait a minute. I'm going to see your responses. We're going to see. I'm going to ask you guys a question. Who wins, Virgil or Ugas? I'm already seeing responses. DJ 2020, Ugas washes him. NYC wants to see Ugas versus Crawford. Ugas wins by decision. Virgil said himself he ain't ready. The real question mark is flan or tres leches? Tres leches, bro. Tres leches for sure. 92 AKU thinks Ugas gets sent to hell. Gonzalo's Maldonado picks Ugas, the Crispy. I like that name, the Crispy 64. Ugas by decision. Carlos says, I see Virgil systematically breaking down Ugas. Okay. Interesting, man. Volume on Max. Send us a message on Instagram. Mark188 says, Ugas, Wiz Finesse got Ugas win. Ortiz win. Ugas doesn't let his hands go. So majority of you guys feel that Ugas would win, but there's a few guys that here, 3 of you guys that picked Ortiz to win. I want to see it, man. I think Ugas is like an unsung hero, man. I think he's underrated, and he's just had a bad draw, man. Poor Ugas. It's because he doesn't speak English. He doesn't talk shit. It's a tremendous fighter, hell of a fighter. He's a bronze medalist. Very technically sound. You put Ugas against any of the top 5 guys. Crawford, Spence, Danny, Pacquiao. He all gives them tough fights. Some fights, stylistically, probably be better for him. Some wouldn't. But he's in there. He's competitive with all those guys. Ugas is a top 5 guy. He's one of the top guys at 147. TJ 2020. Ugas got hella girlfriends, though. Hey, bro, you can't knock it, man. More power to him, More power to him. All right, guys. Keep these questions coming. Junior Manuel, you think we're going to get Canelo versus Triple G in September or 2021, May or September 2021? So the question is, are they going to cancel this Saunders fight and just go straight into the Golovkin fight? I wouldn't be surprised if they went ahead and went straight into the Golovkin fight. It's a bigger fight. Certainly, there'd be bigger fan interest in a Canelo versus Triple G3 fight than a Canelo versus BJ Saunders fight. Saunders is a trickier, more difficult fight for Canelo than Triple G. Canelo already has 2 fights, even though they've been razor-thin close fights with Golovkin, but he's familiar with Golovkin. Golovkin's getting a little bit older. He's looked not as devastating as he was before. Many of you felt that he lost that fight with Derevyanchenko. I was there. I scored it live for Golovkin by 1 point because of the knockdown. But I had it 6-6. It was a close fight. I'd prefer to see Canelo-Golovkin fight because I think there's still unfinished business there with both of them. And they've had 2 fights. To me, Golovkin won the first fight. He wins the first fight, gets a draw. The second fight, I had it a draw. He gets a draw and he loses the fight. They're close fights. They could have gone either way. Finish it. Finish out the trilogy. Let's see who the real legit winner is between those 2 guys, and then move on to other opponents. But I'd love to see it. I want to see the fight. Any updates from Fox? No updates from Fox yet. But I don't know. We might get fights in a closed studio setting. This is me just speculating. I have not talked to anybody, any of my producers from Fox yet. Should probably send them an email, but I can see them because this is going to happen at some point with all sports, I think. It's going to get to a point where they're going to want to start televising again. And how do you, without a live audience, it's going to be all these fights are not going to have live audiences, guys. All these fights that happen from here on out, up until this whole COVID-19 thing gets sorted out, it's going to be behind closed doors. I don't even know if they're going to invite media because the media corps is a lot of people. That's a lot of people to be accountable for if you invite media. I would not be surprised if they don't invite media to these fights. They would probably pick a warehouse with essential personnel. Thing is, that's a lot of people because, okay, one fighter has a team of people. You'd have to limit the amount of people they bring into a fight. Say you limit it to 3. Usually these cards are stacked 10 fights. You can imagine how many people that is. That's a lot of people. But I think, the way probably to go would be to find a warehouse or a backlot, film the fights there with a skeleton crew, with as little people as possible to avoid possible spread. And there's going to have to be a lot of protocols put in place to make sure people are safe. But I think that's what's probably going to happen with fights is no fans allowed. Would not be surprised if no media is allowed. And it's going to be very bare bones to avoid people coming into contact with each other outside of the fighters fighting. Jose De Jesus doesn't think it's going to happen. It has to happen at some point. Sports have to come back at some point. I think fights could be a little bit more doable. Showtime did it already. They televised a fight that had nobody in the arena. They pulled it off. There's a blueprint on how to get this done. The UFC, they did that fight in Brazil. They pulled it off. So there's a blueprint there to how to do this. Now, did anybody get sick that participated in those 2 shows? No one's heard, or at least no one's found out if anybody's gotten sick from those 2 shows. But I would imagine if they went ahead with those 2 shows and nobody got sick, there's a blueprint there and protocol already put there in place to be able to have live shows again that are safe and make sure people don't get sick. But don't expect to go to a live fight for a long, long time, guys. I want to say maybe till the end of the year, to be honest. But as soon as I hear something, I'll let you guys know. I'll go on Twitter and I'll let you guys know what they tell me. As far as I know, I haven't been told anything. California, the commission, still has a moratorium on live events till further notice. and PBC is following that moratorium. Same with the Nevada State Commission, because obviously, if you want to put on a fight, you can't put on the fight without the consent of the commission, unless you do what Dana White's trying to do with the international fights and you buy an island, which that's a whole different thing. I don't even know how, well, international waters or international law, that's a whole separate thing. But for a fight to happen in the U.S., you have to have a commission that's willing to sanction it. Obviously, there'll probably be commissions that are willing to sanction this stuff. If you go to states like Montana, where they have the bare knuckle fights, Wyoming, Florida, actually, now that I think about it, Florida would probably be the place where some of these fights ends up, because Florida and Atlanta probably too, because they're opening up again. So we'll see what happens, man. Time will only tell. Obviously, I want to get back to work. Everybody on my side, media sides, we miss covering the fights, but obviously, I'd rather be safe than sorry. And if I'm going to go cover a fight again, I want to make sure the promoters, the broadcasters, and the commissions have the proper protocols in place, so I know if I'm working a show in my unofficial score role or in my media role, I know if I go to a fight, I'm not at risk of getting sick, that there's proper protocols in place. So I would like to see that first before I would be comfortable about covering a fight as media in the future. All right, guys, a few more questions here. No, I don't want to sub to Pew Pew Die, though I got to respect the guy. The guy has millions of followers. Jose de Jesus says Florida is already opening up venues. Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea, man. I've been reading a lot about what happened with the Spanish flu back in 1918, and they eased up a little bit after like 2-3 months, and then the second wave was the most deadliest for that pandemic. And I'm worried that we might be repeating history with that. Everybody is going crazy, staying inside right now. Everybody is fed up with all this. It sucks. We can't do anything. We want to get back to our normal lives, but let's do it right the first time so we don't have a second wave. Obviously, it could be that either way, we're not going to be able to avoid it, but at least we could avoid the crush of how bad it is. But if you do read on what happened with the Spanish flu, there's 3 waves. The first wave was so-so. People eased up. People thought it was okay. They threw parades, they threw events, normal life again. And then the second wave was the one that really shit hit the fan. That wave really effed stuff up. And then there was a third wave that wasn't as bad, but it was worse than the first wave. So I just hope we're not repeating history with that. Yeah, Iceman doesn't know, man. I don't know. How good your seat when you're doing scoring? I'm there pretty close, man. I'm there. I want to say about a good 10 feet away. No, maybe like 15 feet away. Really close. So close that like sometimes I get blood on my table from the punches. So there's been time that I've had to cover my face with a piece of paper because there's been some pretty damn bloody fights, and we've been at venues that were really, really close together, packed, and you get blood in your drink, on your clothes, on your scoring sheet. So yeah, I'm gonna make a video about that Angel Garcia video, much like in the style that I did my tribute to Roger Mayweather. So look out for it. Want to let you guys know too, we got a lot of content that's up, man. Please tune into the content. We got a lot of videos with Willie Monroe that we did over the weekend, Chris Eubank Jr. that we did as well. So go ahead and tune into that, guys. So we usually do these live chats for an hour. Iceman, I was about to ask if you get blood on me. Yeah, you guys, I get blood on me. I get blood on me. It grosses me the fuck out. Yeah, it grosses me out. Sometimes I gotta go to the bathroom and wash myself because we get blood on our face. And like I mentioned, we got to cover up sometimes because some of these fights get really, really bloody. All right, guys, it's been an hour. I do these live chats for an hour. My voice is starting to go away. It's not the Rona. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, guys. Tune in, watch the content that we have on the channel. Go ahead and follow us as well at Fight Up TV on Instagram and on Twitter. Follow me as well at Hey, it's Marcos V on Instagram and Twitter. We will be back Monday of next week at 8 o'clock. Hey, guys, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. Tell your boxing friends, your boxing fam to subscribe to the channel as well and to tune in the content as well. We're doing our best to give you guys content during this time. It's been a little bit tough. Some fighters don't want to do interviews right now. I don't know why, but there's a lot of fighters that don't want to do interviews right now during this time. So, I'm doing my best to produce content for you guys, but please tune in to us as well. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it. You guys take care of yourselves. Stay healthy. Think of others. Be kind to each other, but more importantly, stay at home and social distance. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Much love to everybody that tuned in. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your night. For you guys watching on the East Coast or internationally, have a good night. For you guys on the West Coast, have a great rest of your night as well. Thank you guys so much. As always, much respect to you guys. I appreciate you guys so much for continuing your support for the channel as well, man. Take it easy, guys. Peace out, and we will see you next Monday.